Jimmy. Hi, Jimmy. Hello, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining in. Don't
Yeah,
you and your wife just practice forms like every night on date night?
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're here. This is
Yeah.
a 2-hour class, and I promise you it takes about 2 hours to get through all of it.
Okay.
There is a KWPR dashboard. Have any of you logged into the dashboard? It's very helpful. There's an abundance of links, good information, and me talking through each of these forms individually on even a slower pace is accessible to you there. So the purpose of today is to make sure that from the brokerage perspective, you've been educated on how to properly and compliantly fill out these forms. But I assure you, you're going to be getting so much information today. It's going to probably most of it go like this, and then you're going to say when you write your first purchase agreement, Jessica, how do I do it? And Jessica is your PC coach. So I'll just start with an introduction, and I think you've probably heard my introduction before, but my name is Melissa Johnson. I'm the broker here. You talked about graduating in 89 and 90. Yeah. I graduated from high school in the mid 90s. And then when I graduated from college the summer of 2000, I was engaged. I was going to be married that summer, and my in-laws worked in construction and housing, and they said, you know, you really should get your real estate license. But at that time, I just envisioned climbing the corporate ladder. I was going to work at Target Corporation or something like that. And the thought of becoming a realtor had this used car salesman kind of connotation in my mind, and I did not want to do it whatsoever. But my parents convinced me, you know, you're marrying into this family that works in construction and housing. You should just do it. You're a student, like take the classes, pass the test, it'll do it, you know, you'll do it so easily as compared to later in your life where you'll have to try to carve out the time and remind yourself how to study. And I was like, okay, yeah, good point. So I got my real estate license, and then my in-laws asked me to host a model home, open for them, a new construction model home in Belle Plaine. Hey, are you here for the class?
I'm here to see if you need any assistance.
Passing through. I don't think so. I think we're on Zoom, and I think we're set. So, yeah.
Good to see you, Jason.
I was gonna say, if you want to stay and contribute.
Matt and Jenny.
And the first two people who came into the model home when I was working in Belle Plaine in like the doldrums of the winter ended up building or buying houses with me. And my mind was really open to the reality that you cannot sell a house to anyone. They sell the house to themselves, and then they just are looking for someone that they trust, that they like, someone who, I wasn't an expert at the time, but someone who's willing to get the information, do it accurately, and give them peace of mind. And so it was like my perspective just completely shifted, and I truly fell into this career and I fell in love with it. But I did that for 20 years. I worked in model homes, I was a solo agent. I did have realtors underneath me that worked with me periodically, and then they would kind of burn out and never stayed on my team. So I found that it was really just best to be an individual solo agent. And here at Keller Williams, they talk a lot about sales volume, and I was selling like between 12 and $15 million of real estate every year, which is quite a bit. So I have a lot of experience, and I have a lot of, oh, Kelly wants to say hi. She's glad you're here.
Kelly.
How are you?
Hey, it's a Pine Island reunion. Come on in.
Yes, it is. Did you know Jenny's from Pine Island?
I did.
Oh.
You didn't know, but she's way too young. Well, and I saw Matt's truck here when I got here, and so I'm like, where's Matt? And I could hear you talking, so let's sneak in and see if this is where it was.
I'm glad.
Anyway, hey, good to see you.
Gonna make him really smart on the buyer docs today.
Good.
Yes. But after doing it for 20 years, I'm not gonna lie, I was feeling burnt out. And I have daughters who are in 6th grade and in 2nd grade. And I was doing models on the weekends. I was working every night. I felt like I was missing so much. And so I came to Olivia, the operating principal owner here. She's a friend of mine from middle school. And I was like, save me. Like, I think I'm just gonna get out of this career. I'm feeling really burnt out. And she said, stop, no, don't even think of it. We have this cool personality assessment that we can give you. And with the knowledge that you gain from that personality assessment, maybe there's just something else you wanna do in real estate, you never know. Well, she knew my family background and that I was working for my family and never considered recruiting me because of that, and we were just friends and friends through real estate. But she said, there are 2 roles that are open here at the Market Center, and you know a ton of people through 20 years in real estate. Can you just share these job descriptions with them? I was like, yeah, I mean, you've helped me so much. It's the least I could do for you. So I tucked them in my bag, and then a couple days later, I pulled them out of my bag, and I read through them, and I was like, oh my goodness, I think I want this broker role. So I had to go back to real estate school. I had to pass all the tests. But I did that last January of 2021, and I became the broker here on February 1st. So I've got 1 year's worth of experience, and I say it has been truly an MBA in real estate. You're one of 200 realtors that work here, and that means there's about 2,000 transactions, and that means there's about 4,000 problems. You guys all work them out really well, but on, I'd say maybe 10 or 20% of those, people have to come to me and say, can you help me with that problem? So I've got a lot of good resources here. I've learned a lot. I love this job. I love this company. You could not be at a better real estate company for training you and supporting you and nurturing you along the way. So as your broker, I will make sure and monitor your compliance. I'll monitor your accuracy. I'm not doing it because, I mean, in all reality, I'm not a huge rule follower. I am, and I believe in, following the speed limit and doing things right and having integrity. But the reason you'll find when I audit your files that they need to be 100% compliant is because if you ever get a complaint from the Board of Ethics or from the Department of Commerce, they'll be looking at that file, that transaction, but they'll also be looking at your history. And so they'll want to see, is this a mistake that they're making consistently? Is this something that they're known to do or shortcut on every single time? So I'm kind of like that parent behind you saying like, I told you to do your homework. Don't let the dog eat it, right? So that's my job here. That's my history here. And I like to tell one other story, but before I do, I would like to hear from you guys what your history is and how you came into real estate.
Me start.
Yeah, go for it.
I was always a stay-at-home mom,
Oh,
competitive cheer coach. I traveled for my husband's job, kind of all over. He worked with oil and gas. So now my kids are grown, and I recently just had, my first granddaughter. We've all moved back up here to Minnesota, and so I kind of wanted my own career, and I've always been interested in it, wanted to do it. If I would have went to college, I probably would end up architecture or something like that. This is kind of
houses are your love language, kind of like me.
Yes, very much so.
And so if we're revealing that we are from the 80s and the 90s, when did you
Well, I
graduate?
graduated in '96, so
Okay, me
from
too.
Pine Island. Yeah, so it was
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool. And your grandma? I'm a
Yes.
second grader.
Oh my goodness.
A lot ahead of me.
Oh my gosh, yeah, a lot of my friends still have littles, so yeah.
Hey, Dave.
That's awesome.
Well, good for you. My girls have both tried cheer. Neither of them
Yeah.
are great at it. But I wanted them to be because I think it's like the perfect combination of dance and gymnastics.
Oh, it's
something that you can do through college and
that's my other love is it's really tumbling.
oh, cool.
Awesome.
How'd you get into real estate?
Well, Kelly kept bugging me
Yeah.
to do so. I'll just cover the last 10 years. So I started a company called Game Feller where we make custom cornhole boards.
I see the
And so
shirt. I
the-
wondered what that was.
The idea is to take your most treasured photos and create something really fun for that board surface. So every time you get your boards out to play, you're reminiscing about those memories, and you get out playing a really fun game.
Yes.
So there's a reason why I started it, but I won't go there right now.
Sure.
And then I also am an ice maker over at the Chaska Curling Center.
Oh, you are?
And
I gotta
instruct
talk to you.
curling.
Okay, I gotta talk to you about
Yeah.
that.
So we do a ton of corporate events over there, and it's a great way to bring people together. I absolutely love doing it.
Yes.
So I have to make sure the ice is nice and flat,
Yes.
so the stones go where they want to go or should go,
Yes.
and then I teach it as well. So
Oh,
It's
cool.
really interesting.
it's super fun. I love it. So I work for the city of Chaska.
Okay. And Jimmy, what did you do before, or are you doing while also being a realtor?
So it's honestly a really big change for me in the last month. I switched from being an ordained pastor with the Assemblies of God, working for a church as an associate pastor, to now being in real estate as a realtor. And I've been remodeling homes since I was in high school. I remember fixing up my mom's house, and since we've owned homes, I've loved fixing them up and selling them, making a profit. Recently, we just bought a rental property. And so my life has kind of been always leaning towards real estate, and seeing my wife in real estate made me really jealous. And so I thought it's a perfect time to be on a team with her.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Well, and they say it's COVID has been the great resignation. So I'm
Yeah.
sure leading a church during COVID was overwhelming. And if I had to just guess why you decided to make a life change, it's that you just needed a little pause and hiatus, kind of like
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. All right, well, before we get started, I'm going to describe to you why I'm going to talk through the forms the way I do. And I'm also hopefully hand in hand going to teach you a lesson that I learned about sales that I would encourage you to follow yourselves. So it was probably 2003, 2004, the real estate market was soaring. I was helping a lot of people buy houses, but I was also helping a ton of investors buy 3 houses at a time, 4 townhomes at a time. It was just so busy, it was so crazy. And to obtain our required continuing education credits, there wasn't a lot of online classes at that time, so we'd all gather together in big rooms like this. And so my colleagues and I went to a seminar, and the teacher, the instructor, looked like a professor. He had this crazy mustache, and he had this like wiry black gray hair. He was just so weird and cool and fun to listen to. And he started out the seminar and he said, all right, well, tell me, how many of you sell the way you want to be sold to? And I'm not kidding you, it was like the kindergarten class. It was like the kids were like, me. Everyone wanted to say why they sell the way they wanted to be sold to. So he let a few people scattered throughout the room. And one, person naturally said, well, I would never pressure someone to make a decision until they have received all the information that they need to make an informed decision. And then the next person said, I just know what I like. People don't need a long time to make decisions. I just give them the basics, and if they can't make their decision right now, then I don't think they're ready to make a decision. I don't want to work with them. And of course, there was someone who was like, I just show them like all the beautiful things in this model, and how can they not love the stainless steel and the fish on the fireplace? And I just have to talk to them all the time and show them all this information. And the teacher, professor, was like, well, then I'm going to suggest to you that you lose 75% of all of your real estate business, because there are 4 different personality types. And if you only sell the way that you want to be sold to, you are really turning off the other 3 personality types. And it was like, oh my gosh, everyone's eyes in the room just immediately got gigantic. Like, you're right. There are so many different personality types, but he grouped them into 4. And we all know there's the DISC assessment, and there's all these personality assessments that you can take, but for whatever reason, these 4 really, really stuck with me. So his acronym is BOLT. He said there's bulls. Bulls makes decisions quickly and easily. There's owls. Owls are super analytical. They take forever to make their decision because they want to research it all. There's lambs, who basically say like, I don't know if I can afford it. I don't know if I deserve it. I'm not sure if this is the right thing, and they really ponder it. And then there's the tigers, who I just acted out. Those are the ones who make impulsive purchases, who say like, yes, I love it. That's my favorite color, or that's exactly the kitchen appliance that I've always dreamed of, or I love that loft upstairs, and they make impulsive decisions. So I'm going to give you this presentation today as if you are an owl. And if you're not an owl, it's probably going to be really painful for you. I am not suggesting that when you go over all your buyer paperwork that you present it as an owl, but you need to educate yourself and pretend you're an owl just while you're establishing your routine and your scripts and whatnot, because there are going to be owls, there are going to be lambs who ask you very specific questions about very specific paragraphs within these contracts, and you're going to want to know it so that you can address it. But by the time you get to the point of writing a purchase agreement with a buyer, you'll know their personality type, and you can speak to the information that they're looking for. I think I'm kind of a strange combination of 3. I'm not much of a lamb, but I'm a combination. So I like exciting things. I make decisive decisions, but I also really do like to understand the analytics and the numbers behind something. So I'm a little bit of an owl, a tiger, and a bull. So going through this as just an owl drives me a little bit bananas too. So we're just gonna do it together. We've opened for about 15 minutes. We'll go through the forms for about another 45, and then at 11 o'clock, we'll take a break to use the restroom. I would like this to be interactive. Don't put pressure on yourselves because I know there's probably not a lot of questions that you'll be able to ask because you'll be taking so much in. But if there are things that you want me to stop and recover, please do just stop me. So these forms change every now and then, so I wait to make copies until you guys are here. So let me just make one more copy and I'll be right back.
How many homes have you guys bought this whole?
Me and my
As your
husband
home? Yeah.
moving a lot because he transfers every couple, 2-3 years. So we would buy a house, pretty much stay there forever, then.
Yeah.
So I thought of it modeling that way, yeah, so, oh God, probably 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Quite a few, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, awesome.
Jenny, would you do me a favor and just in like 3 minutes, would you go out there and grab both the one that's printed and the one that went through? Yeah. Okay, so have you guys all logged onto the North Star MLS at this point in your, no? Okay, good. Well, that's where we're gonna start, so that actually is kind of good for me. Jimmy, have you logged in yet?
Yep.
North Star MLS? Okay, cool. Oh, this chair's broken. All right, so you just simply type in northstarmls.com. And over here on the right, you'll go to Matrix Login, and then you'll put in your NERDS number. So Matt, do you have a NERDS number?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'll say that up front, but I did receive like some login information for a SPAR thing, as well as I just got my license yesterday, approved for license yesterday.
Okay.
I don't know if either one of those would be that login.
Okay, I'm not quite sure, but don't worry about it for today. I just want to make sure that you do have access to it eventually so that you can go in and practice. But when you get to the North Star MLS, it looks like this. And you are able to take these gray bars and move them around. So you'll find a way that you like to kind of personalize this. And you'll be able to create favorite searches, you'll be able to watch the market and get all their news and information and whatnot. So know that you can customize this. As you can imagine, when you make an offer on a house, you will most likely make an offer on a property that's listed on the MLS. So I'm just gonna go down here. I'm just gonna pick a, let's see here. Just gonna go in and pick a listing and I'll show you how you can create, the forms. So up here with the green and white kind of half starburst, be able to check on this listing, use this starburst and go in and follow these series of prompts. What's nice about doing it this way is it's going to fill in all the pertinent information. So like it's going to fill in the address on every page, it's going to fill in the legal description on every page. And so this is a nice way to save yourself any errors and just have it automatically filled in. Not sure why it's taking so long. Here we go. They call it a wizard. So you would create a transaction and you would use a template, and Keller Williams has templates that are just representation forms for the buyer, just listing paperwork. You can also do the purchase agreement and the buyer representation forms, or you can just do the purchase agreement. So you'll use this wizard, thank you. You'll use this wizard and you'll just follow along. It gives you the ability to input in your client's names, your name, all kinds of good details that are going to make establishing this paperwork packet a lot easier for you. And Jessica has separate classes on that, so we don't need to cover it today. Where I'm going to go to is this house button over here. Once you establish some transactions, they'll all be listed down here. And I'm gonna go to the one that I've established that is for the buyer bootcamp forms. Then once you click on that, I like to use this button over on the right-hand side that says forms, because it takes all the forms and it lists them out in a natural order that you're going to be talking Are any of the three of you able to come to the boot camp on Saturday for the sellers?
I'm going to try to.
Awesome, yeah, or even just Zoom in.
I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Some of the forms that we go through today will also be covering on Saturday, but buyer forms and seller forms in general are very, very different. So just today, we're covering just the buyer forms. However, this is one that you will need to cover with both of them. This is the best form to start in both cases because it says right on here, this is not a contract. This is for disclosure only. So it's necessary that you start with this from an educational perspective from the Minnesota Department of Commerce, but it also is just very natural and very easy. It kind of like primes the pump almost. So it lets the person that you're sitting down in front of, so in this case, any buyer, know that there are 4 different agency relationships that licensed realtors can have with consumers. The first is called a seller's broker. What that means is you would work in just the best interest of the seller. You'd put a for sale sign in their front yard. You would do the marketing necessary to obtain showings. Then when someone makes an offer, you would negotiate in their best interest and you would help them sell their house. What's happening today is we're representing you as a buyer's broker. So I'm going to be sending you listings that I think are good for the criteria that you've given to me. You're going to be reviewing those criteria. You're probably even going to be looking online and finding other houses that you're interested in. You'll send those to me. Then I'll schedule showings to allow you access to be able to go in and look at those houses. And once you decide that you want to buy one, I'll write up the purchase agreement and we'll make the offer on your behalf. But I work in just your best interest. However, if you decide to make an offer on a house that someone within our market center, Keller Williams Preferred Realty, not any Keller Williams in the Twin Cities, just Keller Williams Preferred, if you decide to make an offer on that, you need to understand that I then will be acting as what's called a dual agent, because it's not just me as the realtor, it's me as the realtor and the brokerage who represent both the seller and also the buyer. You'll have knowledge of that, and you'll be given the option to either agree to dual agency or not dual agency. Likewise, if I'm holding an open house on the other side of Burnsville, and it isn't a listing that I had sent to you guys, but you say, let's check in with Melissa, and heck, why not? It might be fun to go see her listing, and then you decide that you do want to buy it. If I personally am representing the seller and also representing you as a buyer, that's called dual agency. Then there's also something called a facilitator. In this seller's market right now, where people are kind of selling their houses off market and they're doing some marketing on their own, it is coming up more often now than otherwise, where you can just essentially do the paperwork for the buyer and or the seller. But you as a facilitator can only represent people as a facilitator. If you're already a seller's rep or a buyer's rep, you can't facilitate the other party who comes in and just says, I want to buy this house. The key difference with facilitation is you just need to know that those clients of yours who ask you to be a facilitator do not receive all the same fiduciary responsibilities. It's outlined in which the duties that you are going to perform to them. But in your real estate classes, you would have heard the acronym OLD CAR. And I wish that these were in that order of OLD CAR. For some reason, they're not. But as you go through this agency form, and don't ask them to sign right away, go ahead and talk through all of this. And then say, I want you to make sure and understand that I am going to be giving you my loyalty. I am going to be obedient to you. Even if you ask me to make an offer on a house $50,000 less than it's listed for, I need to be obedient, do what you ask of me. I cannot disclose your private information, but if I do have material facts or pertinent information about the homes that you're going to be making an offer on, I do need to disclose that. I need to keep all your information confidential. I need to use reasonable care in performing my duties and also good accounting with the money that I might help you exchange for earnest money and whatnot. I also need to let you know that I, as a licensed realtor and just as a human, am not going to be discriminating against anyone, but certainly it may be important for you to know if there is a sexual predator living in the community that you plan to make this offer on. I can't tell you because that would be discriminatory, but you can go to the corrections at the state of Minnesota website right here, and you can look that up for yourself. Do you have any questions about how realtors interact with customers? No, they never have any questions. And then I say, then please just go ahead and sign and date right here. Now, this is a form where I didn't have to enter any information in. So we're just gonna go to this file here on the left, and you're gonna go down to save and exit. The next one, we are going to be adding bits of information, so I strongly encourage you to get in the habit of going up here to file and just saving it every now and then, because you'll put in a lot of information here, and if you have to go back and re-enter it, if for some reason you didn't save it, it would just be a nightmare.
Hey, Melissa,
Yes.
is it possible to switch my view from the camera in the room to the computer?
Oh my gosh, I should have done that before. Oh, I'm so glad you spoke up. Yes, yes,
No
yes.
problem. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let me enter this stop video. Share screen. I really should have done this before. I'm so sorry. Can you see that now?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. You're welcome. All right. So you've been to a lot of open houses. You've talked with a lot of realtors. You're finally at the point now where we're going to be making a decision to work together. Now, this may be the day that they make the offer. Ideally, it would be prior to that. Please get in the habit of signing these buyer rep forms as soon as possible. But if it happens to be the day of the offer, I totally understand. I've been in your shoes. I totally get it. But what you need to try to make sure, the buyer and also the seller representation forms are going to have 3 dates on them. They're going to have a date up here on the right-hand corner. They're going to have a start date down here, and they're also going to have the date that they sign it on the very, very bottom. And from a compliance perspective, we want all 3 of those dates to be the same. So you're gonna want to say that this contract for representation starts on today's date, which we're calling November 6th, and ends a certain date in the future. Now, this buyer representation contract is going to end on the date of closing. So if they make the offer on March 15th and they close on July 1st, then that's when the buyer representation contract ends. So it really doesn't matter what the end date is here, although I will tell you, just as a pro tip, you should try to have this for as long as possible. And most realtors here at Keller Williams prefer to do it for 1 year. Now, keep in mind, the lambs aren't gonna care. The owls may have a few questions about it. The bulls are gonna say, well, what if you don't find me a house? I'm not gonna be in a contract with you to be shopping for houses with you if you can't find me the house that I want. Well, that's okay, that's no problem. We can end this buyer representation contract whenever you are comfortable with. Even if it ends before closing, that's okay as well, because the purchase agreement will supersede the buyer representation contract. You just need to make sure at the time that you're writing the offer with them that you are that your contract has not expired. This buyer representation agreement, it protects them, but it really protects you. So this is something that you're not necessarily going to say that to them, that this is mutually beneficial, but you need to understand the Association of Realtors put this in place to really represent you. You don't need to use legal names up here. Just put in your buyer's names as you know them. You know, like, hey, I know you as Joe Smith, maybe his name is Joseph, that really is fine. This then lets the buyer know that they have obligations and that you have obligations, that you shall make reasonable effort to help them locate a property, that you will use all your professional knowledge and skills to assist in negotiating and working all throughout the transaction to getting to closing. They have to understand then that they have obligations to you, that they are now agreeing to work exclusively with you, that they are going to agree to follow all the prompts and steps that you give them along the way. You can collect from them, if you wish, a retainer fee. What's kind of cool about that, and I only have a couple of realtors who've ever done it here, but what's kind of cool about that is you get that commission right away. So if for some reason you needed it for marketing or something like that, that does get paid out to you right away. It would be something you'd have to pay them back if they don't ever buy a house from you, so be careful, you know, kind of the promises that you make. But what they then need to understand is that though the real estate commission comes from a seller in 99.9% of the situations, they really are obligated to pay you this compensation. So it says that very explicitly right here. It doesn't say anything about a seller. There's going to be another form that you'll have them sign, and I recommend you bring that out right away if you're doing this at the time that you make an offer. That will clarify that the 2.7% is actually coming from the MLS advertised cooperating rate of 2.7. But they do need to understand, though, they don't have to pay the 2.7 out of pocket as long as we cooperate with another real estate office. They do have to pay an additional commission to the real estate company of $4.99. People call it a lot of different things, like a broker admin fee, BAC. Ultimately, it is just an additional commission. It wasn't invented by Keller Williams Preferred Realty. I have no idea what real estate company invented it, but we just followed suit. It doesn't come to me as the broker, it comes to the brokerage, and then the brokerage is able to use it for like operating expenses and paying the front desk and doing things that we need to run a business here. It's a little bit tricky to talk about Section B because what this says is if they do not buy a house within the end of this real estate contract, but they do buy a house that you've shown them during the period of this, after our relationship ended, that they still have to pay you that 2.7%. So that's a little tricky to talk about. You'll want to practice this, but you won't want to skip over it because this is something where it is an important contractual document. You don't want to skip over it. You can put in here any amount of days, and if you're feeling uncomfortable about it, just put in 30 days. The likelihood that they buy something that you've shown them 30 days after is not good. If there's someone that you feel like, these are kind of scammers, I feel like they are going to try to weasel me out of this deal, make it as long as you possibly can in it 6 months. But read through that just so that you fully understand exactly what that means. Then we talk about the general nature of the property. Oh, wait, 1 second here. This is all in bold. I don't really ever read this, but I'm gonna read it out loud to you. Buyers' actions in locating a property may affect payment of compensation by sellers and may therefore obligate a buyer to pay all or part of this compensation. So this is what I'm referring to in that the seller may not agree to pay the real estate commission. For example, the act of going through an open house unaccompanied by the buyer's broker and licensee representing the buyer, or signing a purchase agreement through another broker with another owner, for example, for sale by owner, may require that the buyer's payment of the full compensation by the buyer themselves. Then we talk about the general nature of this particular buyer's interest in making an offer on this house. Most people are just going to be this middle bottom section here that says residential personal, but Keller Williams Preferred Realty recommends that you check all of these because the truth is you just never know what someone's life situation might be. Maybe they've been looking at houses, they can't find one that they like, their parents give them a big chunk of money and they say, hey, buy a piece of land, and then later figure out how you might build on it. You want it to apply no matter what the situation is. If you're putting in all this time and effort to help them locate, follow the journey to locate what's right for them. Also, I tease and say, you just never know. What if they win the lottery? They might want to buy their residential home, they might want to buy a vacation property, they might want to buy an investment property, and you want to be able to represent them in this time frame. So you've got the contract locked up. You also need to make sure that they understand that you are a licensed realtor. You hold your license with the state of Minnesota and you are authorized to conduct business and write contracts for real estate. But there's a lot of other aspects of real estate that you can do. You can assist them in making the connections, but there are a few things you can't do. For example, you can't close their property. So we are going to, as a full service real estate company, we are going to assist them in getting all their documents and all their information to a title company. But it's very private and confidential information. So if they don't want us to hand that off to someone else, they would check line 67 that says they wish to arrange for that all by themselves. Most often, you're going to check line 66 and say, yep, they're going to allow me to schedule it for them. But don't miss this. There's signatures in this document, but this is the only initial. Do not miss this. I see this as a mistake a lot. I'll also just tease and say, when I get to this point, it's already feeling, and we're only, 1 page into it, it's already feeling a little heavy. It's already feeling a little bit a lot. And so I'll try to add some comedy and shake it up a little bit. And I'll say hey, tell me about your great aunt Susie. And they'll be like, what? Well, is she a title closer? And they'll be like, no, and I don't have a great Aunt Susie. But it just sort of lightens the mood a little bit, and then it also triggers in their memory. If there ever was anyone, like a former neighbor, a relative, a friend, or whatever, who said, I'm a title closer, and if you ever go to buy your first house, I want to make sure to be able to close it for you. And we want to hear that now rather than later, because our title companies go through a lot to prepare all these documents and all this information. So we want to know right away if they plan to schedule the closing themselves. And this is just, one little line and a whole bunch of information we're giving them, so they're gonna glaze over and they're not gonna remember unless you kind of shake it up with them a little bit. The buyer also needs to acknowledge that there are going to be additional fees that they have to pay to close on this house. So they're going to make their down payment, and then they're also going to have some closing costs. They're going to have out-of-pocket costs for things like home inspections. Now, I talked through that sexual predator information pretty casually, pretty naturally. I've had a lot of practice with it. But the sexual predators comes up a lot, and then this foreign investment in real estate comes up a lot, and they're weird. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's just hard to weave that in when you're talking about them and you're talking about their house and they're talking about their decisions. This is stating if they buy a house from someone who is not a US citizen, and that someone sells the house, takes all the proceeds, and leaves the country without paying their appropriate taxes, then they, as the buyer, will be responsible for all of the taxes, which is just crazy. Like, I don't even know how that law passed. But that's how it works, and it's in 3 different documents at 3 different times. So what you, as their well-trained professional, need to make sure and do, you're going to look for it on the seller's disclosure, and then you're going to make sure that the seller is the one who answers that question when it comes up in these other 3 spots. You don't want to worry your buyer about this right now, so you're going to talk through it really briefly, or maybe even scan right over it if it's like a bull or a tiger. But you need to know for yourself how important this Foreign Investments in Real Estate Property Tax Act is. Along with the additional costs, if the buyer chooses to have a home warranty or a private home inspection, those will be things that they will likely have to pay for out of pocket. As we talked about, there is a possibility that I may show you a house that is also listed by Keller Williams Preferred Realty, or maybe even by myself at Keller Williams. Is that something that you would agree to allow me to act as a dual agent? And most people will say yes. I don't care who has the house listed. I'm desperately searching for a house, and we'll make it work. However, I've not had a buyer not agree to dual agency, but I have once had a seller say, nope, I refuse to agree to dual agency and allow anyone else from your office or yourself to sell the property directly without representation. So it's just important that you give them the option, that they know kind of the pros and the cons, and that they are the ones who make the decision. They also need to understand that both the buyer and I may have had other previous agency relationships, and that I may know other potential buyers. I mean, if this is a hot property in Prior Lake where I live, I may be showing it to you as buyer A, and I may be showing it to buyer B and buyer C. We need to recognize that. If we choose to end this contract, the termination of our fiduciary duties, it has to be in writing. Again, the sexual predator information comes up again. So as I said, as a realtor, holding my license with the state of Minnesota, just as a human, I do not discriminate against anyone. But as you're looking in a community for a new place to put your roots down, it may be important to you to know if there are any sexual predators in the area. I can't discriminate against them, so I can't tell you, I can't dig up this research for you, but you can go to the corrections website at the state of Minnesota. It's important to know that this agreement and also all the other addenda that may be included in this agreement make up the entire contract, and the entire contract needs to be executed by both parties. If it's just one-sided, it's not an executed agreement. Electronic signatures are just as valid, and by signing here, you consent to allow me to communicate with you, for example, by text messages, also with emails and whatnot. As these forms have changed and evolved, it's really important to be looking for this $4.99 right here. Some people will write 2.7% plus $499. And other people, just depending on your personality type, how you like to see it, may just write it in here under the other section. Buyer understands that a one-time brokerage commission of $499 shall be paid as a part of closing costs upon successful closing. Other things that you might write in the other section, you may say something like, buyer has already seen property 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street, and this property shall be excluded from my buyer representation contract. Should they buy that home, they're not contractually obligated to work with me. Or just other kind of little quirky, nitpicky things. It's rare and unlikely that you write something in there, but if you're working with an owl who says, I want to make sure I don't have to pay a commission if I buy my grandma's house, you would write it in there. It's really important to the market center that you fill this out thoroughly, so please write in their name. Again, it doesn't have to be legal. Please write in their current address, their phone number, and their email address. God forbid you get COVID and you wind up in the hospital, or you're in a car accident, but you still have these active buyers that are looking. We could go into your file on command and we could get their contact information here to reach out to them. And this is really the best spot to save it. So don't be sloppy. I see a lot of sloppy agents when it comes to this form. Please don't be sloppy. Be very, very thorough and complete as possible. So I click the save button, but now that we are at the end of this form, I'm going to go down to save and exit so that you can see how you can easily move on to the next one. Now, I said I came from a different brokerage with 20 years of experience, so this form is actually really fun for me to go over. It may not have as much zest for you, but this is how I present it. I say, so the state of Minnesota has purchase agreement contracts that we are going to be using. These two that we've already gone over are included in those. But Keller Williams Preferred Realty has found many things that have come up multiple times that they feel are really valuable for me to go over with you, and also for me to have disclosed to you and for you to sign off saying that you understand that these are conditions of the market right now. This form is just so awesome because it gives you a heads up on things that we at our brokerage with 200 realtors and 2,000 closings a year have found are a wealth of knowledge and good experience. So you need to understand, and this is a form that both buyers and sellers fill out, you need to understand that a seller, or you as the seller, are required to fill out a property disclosure statement. Whether it's a long document, a short document, the document that's provided by the Minnesota Association of Realtors, the seller have to give some amount of disclosure. Then you, as the buyer, are really going to want to slow down, slow your roll at the time that you're excited to make an offer. You're going to want to read that seller's disclosure. You don't want to scan through it. You want to read through it in detail because it's really pertinent and valuable information that's going to impact your decisions on what you're going to offer on the house. We also want you to know that you will likely request that the purchase of your home is contingent upon conducting a home inspection, and you may even ask for a home warranty to be included in the purchase. Home inspections are done on behalf of the buyers. Those are usually paid for by the buyers and loyal to the buyer, which is different than a home appraiser. It's also something that when you look at the age and the condition of the furnace, the refrigerator, the garage door opener, you may decide that you want to include a home warranty on the house. That's something that you can pay for as a part of your closing costs at closing, or it's something you can negotiate and ask the seller to pay. But again, this is an additional fee. It's a seller's market right now, so it's very likely that you're going to be in a multiple offer situation. But you need to understand down here as the buyer, that is the seller's choice to divulge or not divulge any information about the existence of multiple offers. There are code of ethics and standards of practice regarding multiple offers, and those allow the listing agent the ability to withhold information about that. And that could be very frustrating and stressful to you, but you need to understand it's not reflective of me or Keller Williams, it's reflective of the decision of the seller and the seller's real estate company. If you're making an offer on a property that's within an association, you also have a monthly fee or maybe a quarterly fee that you'll have to pay to be a part of this association. And you have to acknowledge that there's going to be rules and regulations that you have to follow. Those rules and governing documents are going to be provided to you by the seller, and the seller is going to have to pay for them out of pocket before listing their house. But you need to make sure, again, just like the disclosure, to take the time and read this community association information. If for some reason, now again, you're going to think about the personality type of the buyer that you're working with right now. But if for some reason they're buying a house during utilizing a tax deferred exchange, which is also called a 1031 exchange, these two sections go together and it kind of drives me bonkers that they're not placed together. So I usually will skip over this line that says tax deferred exchange and I'll just remind them that Keller Williams is a real estate company. We are experts in the field of selling and marketing real estate, but we are not experts in the field of construction, tax advice, legal advice, environmental issues, title examination. So while we'll be kind of the quarterback of your team right here, we are going to be handing you off to a few other professionals and maybe even bringing in professionals if we find things along the way. One of those professionals would be if you are doing a tax deferred exchange, which means that we're not going to describe this to them on the form because they're not going to be in the mood for this education. But for you guys, knowing what a tax deferred exchange is, if you come upon someone who, like, let's just say, sold their Gulf condo in North Carolina, and they're getting old, and so now they've decided they just want to have all of their investments here in Minnesota, where they're likely going to be, retiring and growing old at Green Acres or whatever. They may sell their condo, their rental property, and it has to be another like property that they purchase. They'd have to buy another investment property here somewhere within the state of Minnesota. You can assist them in writing the purchase agreement to buy that property here in Minnesota, but they have to facilitate it through a separate 1031 exchange facilitator, like a whole separate company. Likewise, people do this kind of thing with farmland, with hunting land, with investment properties. The possibility of you coming upon one of these right away early on in your real estate career is fairly slim. So nothing that you need to spend too much time researching about, and certainly nothing that you need to talk with the average buyer or seller about. But I want you to know, again, the owl, I want you to know why it's in here. It's also a requirement of Minnesota state statute that every single family dwelling and every dwelling unit in a multifamily have an approved and operational carbon monoxide alarm. So you're going to be looking for those as you're doing showings throughout these houses. The home inspectors are going to be looking for these. And if the seller doesn't have them in place, this is something that even in a seller's market where people are negotiating that they do have to have them in their house. You'll want to let them know that we are going to be putting a target closing date in your purchase agreement. And that closing date is something that everyone wants to meet. Everyone wants to pack up and move out as planned. Everyone wants to pack up and move in as planned. But unfortunately, there are a lot of unforeseen circumstances when it comes to maybe this house that you're buying is they're moving out because they're buying something else. There can be a whole chain of real estate closings that happen in one day. There can be problems with mortgages, there can be problems with title work. So while we are going to work very hard at setting a closing date and meeting it, there is certainly a possibility that it might not be met, so you just need to have your expectations really realistic about it. This is my favorite section in here because if your closing has been delayed for some reason, some unforeseen circumstance, you can use this in your language by saying, I'm really sorry, and I know this is incredibly stressful. I just want to remind you, we did talk about it that first day when we went over all those additional Keller Williams disclosures. And that will tend to shut them right down. We're like, oh, that's right, Melissa, you did forewarn me of this. But they won't still be frustrated, but as long as you've gone over with them and they're the ones who signed it and acknowledged it. Closing day is really stressful. It's very stressful for every party involved, including realtors. And it can be kind of crazy. There's a lot of balls in the air. You'll want to let them know that, especially for the sellers, and we'll talk about this on Saturday, but you'll want to let them know that they are entitled to a pre-closing walkthrough. And it's more than just a luxury. It's really, really important because when you get to that pre-closing walkthrough, whether it's the morning of closing or the day before closing, the house is very likely going to look pretty messy. There's still going to be boxes. There's still going to be stuff sitting around if you're doing it the night before closing, especially. That can be a little deflating because it's not this beautiful staged, freshly clean, smells like pine sol house that they did the open house for. So it can be a little overwhelming and you want to make sure that they know that. But the reason it's so important is if there's something wrong with that house, once they close on the house, they've agreed that they're buying it in its current state and condition. So if you see something in the pre-closing walkthrough that they're not happy with, or they feel like they need to negotiate with the seller on, you need to literally hold up the closing and say, we're not closing tomorrow as planned, we're waiting until this is repaired. And I learned that the hard way. I had a seller verbalize to me that they would put on proper new roofing that they had mixed up, and they didn't. And we pursued legal action and found that there's absolutely no legal recourse, because when you sign on the day of closing, you agree to buy it in that exact condition. Make sense? All right, so those are just a bunch of additional disclosures that Keller Williams Preferred Realty wants them to know about. And it is required by federal law that if one person has ownership in more than one business where the customer may be using multiple, they need to be informed of it. It needs to be disclosed to them. So if you've ever bought a new car, they've likely had an affiliated business form that you've signed with them too that says, you know, we own Ford Motor Company, we own Ford Motor Credit, we own Ford Warranty, we own all these different things. There's common ownership amongst all of them, and you need to know. This is just a disclosure though, this is not an agreement. We understand that we have the right to select our own providers for these services, that its agents strongly encourage me to shop for the best service. This is not a commitment to working with any of them. This is just a federal disclosure. So you'll hear the name Olivia here. She is one of multiple owners of Keller Williams Preferred Realty. She and the other owners may have or do have ownership in Minnesota Title, New American Funding, and Keller Mortgage. Again, you are not required to use any of these listed providers. This is just a disclosure. So you've got a new buyer. You haven't even started shopping for houses yet. Ideally, Keller Williams Preferred Realty would like you to have gone over all 4 of those forms with them before you go out house shopping. We know the reality of that is slim, but those are the 4 documents that you need to do with all buyers. Now we're getting into documents that you're going to do once you make an actual offer. They're more specific to a property than just actually the buyer. So when you go through your packet, Jenny, after that disclosure, affiliated business disclosure, is there a compensation disclosure? I can't remember if I changed the order of these forms or not.
Affiliated business disclosure, and then it goes to Minnesota Title, personal property agreement.
Okay, so
Purchase agreement.
I'll go to personal property, and I might need to print this. I think I need to print this for you, but I'm gonna print it anyway. I'll try to update these, and then sometimes I rush out of these into another meeting, and oh, the printer is offline, shoot, never mind. We'll come back to that form, and we'll just go to the form that you guys are on. When someone says to you, hey, I'm really excited about looking at this house, or we're walking through the house and you really like this house a lot, I literally recommend that you go old school, that you bring along one of these personal property agreement forms and that you take notes. Because you'll be able to look back on the pictures and see things, but there's bound to be something that you missed, that you just completely spaced it. They said, oh my gosh, I absolutely love that shelving that they have their old DVD collection on. I mean, I can't wait to put my DVDs on there. And there's nothing more embarrassing than getting to that day of closing walkthrough and that shelf that they were so excited about isn't there. You've now helped 6 other buyers, you've had too many other things on your brain, you walk into the basement, you don't even notice it's gone, and they look at you like, I told you how excited I was to put my DVD collection on that shelf, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm losing my mind. So as you're walking through a house that they absolutely love, I highly recommend that you take notes on this personal property agreement. As you learned in real estate school, anything that's not physically bolted into the house can be considered personal property, and there's a ton of gray area. Like, the curtain rods are supposed to stay, but not necessarily the curtains. And the dishwasher stays because that's connected to plumbing, but the refrigerator doesn't necessarily, because you can just unplug it and move it. So things that are most common on here are gonna be things like the chest freezer in the basement, the workbench in the garage, the shelving in the mechanical room. Then it comes down to some of these nitpicky things like shelving and TV brackets. It is going to be listed in the purchase agreement. Some things are explicit in the purchase agreement. It doesn't matter to me. It is important to them. write it on here. Do yourself a favor and try to avoid any conflicts and questions and disappointment on the date of closing. It does say that you're conveying this for, I think it's something like $1 or something. No one ever exchanges money at closing, so don't worry about that. This is just separate from a real estate contract because it's not real estate. This is a personal property agreement. The buyers will sign it and they'll send it over as a part of their offer. And then the sellers will either modify it or just agree to it as is, and they'll sign it on the bottom.
So the buyer in this case is just basically saying, this is what they would like. If they come to a point of making an offer, we also want to see this included.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. Now, it's pretty common right now. Do you have the form for your protection, get a home inspection?
It's on the back of that.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. It's pretty common right now that people are so highly motivated to buy a house that they waive their right to conduct a home inspection. And in my professional opinion and in my prior experience, because I had one person do it one time about 5 years ago, it is a terrible, 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 terrible idea. But if they have to do it to get the house, they'll really want to make sure and have them sign this form. This is actually something that's put forth by the Federal Housing Administration, and so it's something that your FHA loan officer may require that the buyer sign, but this is just good business. It's just really smart for you. It describes very clearly how an appraisal and a home inspection are different, and it is so common for a buyer, especially a first-time buyer or a buyer who hasn't bought a house in 10 or 20 years, to think that they're the same, and they're not. The home inspection is something that you do as part of your negotiations, and it's something that you pay for out of pocket, and you do just for informational or negotiating purposes. It gives you a very full and a very thorough kind of record of what the condition of the house is. An appraisal is not a home inspection because it's done a lot faster. They don't look as closely at the condition of the furnace or do all the burners on the stove work. They are just coming in to make sure that the house is in habitable and good condition and how it may compare in terms of finish quality to the other homes that they're comparing. So an appraisal is very different than an inspection. And we strongly encourage you to get a home inspection. But if you choose not to, then that's your decision to do so. So like down here, it literally says, we've read this document. We understand if we wish to get an inspection, it is best to do so. The appraisal is different from the home inspection. We make a voluntary choice whether to get a home inspection. The reason I think this is, it's in your packet, the reason I think this is so important is, you know who they're gonna point fingers at when they buy a house that has problems? It's gonna be the realtor who didn't show them everything. You're gonna say, no, 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 I told you to get a home inspection. You chose not to, you signed off here saying you understood that. I'm just gonna go back to that compensation disclosure, even though I acknowledge that it might not be in your packet.
It's just back, if you flip over.
It is,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's there.
Got it, okay, perfect. So this used to be woven into the buyer representation agreement. And I actually kind of wish it was still in there because it was so much easier to say, you owe me 2.7%, but checkbox, the seller is going to be paying the 2.7% to our brokerage. They took it out because I think they recognized that realtors were just breezing over it and that buyers weren't fully understanding, like, who pays for what? Where does that come from? So this makes it perfectly clear. It is specific just to that property that they're making the offer on, that from the seller, my real estate brokerage, my realtor's company is making 2.7. And then from me, I don't have to pay them the 2.7 because it's offered as cooperating compensation from the listing broker. But from me, I do still owe that $4.99, which is the broker administrative commission. All right. This one also asks for addresses. I think that's a little unnecessary, but please be thorough and complete. I would like to fill that in there. So you have, by real estate law, technically the obligation to go over this compensation agreement before you even started on the purchase agreement. All right? If it really came down to a lawsuit, if it really came down to something bad, so many things are done electronically, it would be seen that that was signed and at what time in relation to the purchase agreement. So just make it a habit, make it your best business practice to have the and sign it before they sign the purchase agreement. Okay, we are gonna take a break, because that was a lot of info, and when we come back, it's gonna be even more info. Because the purchase agreement and all the supplemental docs are what's on the docket.
So silly question, you know, when we have a buyer,
Yeah.
this is the area we would go into in the system and just basically go.
Yep, you fill out, it's nice that you can fill it out in type rather than handwriting, which is, you know, kind of how you used to always have to do it. And then from here, you can send it for electronic signatures, or you can print it off and you can sign it with it in person. We'll be right back.
I bought one house in my life.
Oh,
I'm loving
really?
it.
Yeah.
It's been like 25 years. I'm like, okay, I don't remember anything about that experience.
Hey, I know you're busy, do you have a quick minute? Awesome, I'll be brief. Talked to Amy and Ryan yesterday, they were happy, they said thank you so much. I'm curious.
So I have access to this, I'm sure, so.
Yeah. I think you do. Have you done your orientation with Victoria yet?
I came in and met with her last week to put in the paperwork for my license.
Did she go over a binder with you?
Yeah, I think this one.
Wait, you can see if she wrote down here, it says Cooper's in there.
I'm getting a lot of information.
Yeah, they hit you with a lot of stuff, and you're like, what's that?
I don't know what I have in there.
Oh, I think you still need to do your orientation. Yeah, good.
I think we did get that set up.
Do you? So when you have, do you have your Keller Williams email address, land login and such?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So, yeah, you'll want to schedule a meeting with her and you'll get it all from her.
All right, awesome.
Yeah. Okay, Jimmy, are you back? Oh, I have to go, but thank you for all the classic info. All right. Okay, so the purchase agreement is a document that's going to be used in negotiations. It's also going to be given to the mortgage company. They're going to use it for the really important background information on the loan. And then the title company is going to use it to prepare all of the documents they need to transfer title, to sign the mortgage, the deed, and things like that. So this is really the very most important document that you'll fill out. You should put the pressure on yourself, but it's really, really important to make it accurate. It's also very long, so your buyers are going to be glazing over through much of this, but just do your best. So you'll write the date that you're making the offer up here in the top right-hand corner. This one, it is really, really important to get their legal names. So ask them what their legal names are, ask them for their middle names, ask them for their middle initial. I think middle names is the best route to go. Skip over this earnest money section for now, and we'll come back to it. We literally are just going to go down to the bottom and then we'll come back up. So we are making an offer to purchase the property at, and this is where I said it's really helpful to have this all automatically filled in through the wizard. So you need to write the street address, the city, the county, the zip code, and the legal description. Said purchase shall include all of the following improvements, fixtures, and appurtenances. So this is where we talked about, does it include the dishwasher? Does it include the drapes? Does it include, and all of those are listed out here. So for example, it says curtain and drapery rods, balances, draperies, curtains, window coverings, all the towel rods, all the attached lighting, all the fans and fixtures, the TV antennas, the thermostats, the bulbs for the tulips in the yard. And then there may be some things that they don't want included actually. So if there's a junky shed, if there's a pile of rocks, if there's a pile of firewood, if there's an old overgrown, swing set, you can write things in here that you want to make sure that they take off and dispose of and remove from the property. I've had a lot of instances where people leave a bunch of junk in the shed, where they leave a bunch of junk in the basement, and they really are not allowed to do that. You can pay for disposal and then send the bill to them. I think there'd be a little bit of a fight, but things that are real estate and things that are not in real estate are all to be written on here, and then nothing else is to stay at the property. We've done our research, we've shown a bunch of houses, we've done CMAs, and we know that we want to make an offer on this house at $200,000. We know from the research and the preparation that you've already done to obtain a mortgage on the house that you've saved 20% to put down so you can avoid private mortgage insurance, and that means you're taking a mortgage for 8%. There may be some other things like a contract for deed, or if they're assuming the current mortgage that you would fill in on lines 3 and 4, but most often you're just gonna put the amount here. If they're buying in outstate Minnesota, they can even buy with 100% mortgage financing, where they don't have to put any money down. Most often they put 3.5% down, or they put 5% down. Whatever the balance is, the more money they put down, the stronger their offer is going to be perceived by the seller. So you're going to want to encourage them to put as much as they possibly can down. Now, when making an offer on a house at $200,000 with down, you're gonna put a small portion of that 5% down at the time you make the offer in what's called earnest money. It is most common to make your earnest money 1% of the sales price of the home. It can be any amount that you wish. I've seen some that are really, really high. What's important for you to make sure and educate your buyers on, however, is that that money literally gets turned over like almost immediately. It can be in the form of a check. We also have a way to do it electronically called trust funds. And then that money goes completely out of their control. It goes to the real estate company who has the listing. It goes into a trust account, as you guys learned about in real estate class. But it is then a small portion of their down payment. So it's not an administrative fee. It's not just, money that they're taking to the casino and gambling on. It is a portion of that 5%. You would also put in then on the first page of the purchase agreement the date that they want to close on the house. So this is going to be something that either that date's really important to them, or maybe you've already talked to the listing agent and you know the ideal closing date for the seller. The next is the financing contingency on page 2. So we're letting them know again that you are contingent upon obtaining this mortgage financing, that it's a first mortgage, and that it either does or does not include any grant or loan assistance money. You're most likely going to be saying it's a first mortgage and it does not include this. You'll say that it's a conventional loan. Maybe if it's that 3.5% down, you'll say it's an FHA loan. If they're a veteran, they can get a VA loan, or if they're in rural areas, and there's maps for this, where they can buy with 0 down, it's called a USDA loan. Most often though, you're gonna be doing conventional or FHA. So interest rates are getting higher, and mortgage financing is getting a little bit more creative. So for many years, probably for 10 years, the only thing we were checking is that it's a first mortgage and that it does not include any grant money. But you may be in a situation now where someone says like, oh, God, I've saved 15% for this down payment. I really don't want to have to pay private mortgage insurance because I don't have a full 20% down. So is there any way around it? And these loan officers now are going to say, yeah, take an 85% loan or take an 80% loan, put 15% down, and then I'll also give you a small loan for the 5% that you can pay off when you get your taxes back, or you can pay off when you get your Christmas bonus, or you can make it a goal to pay off in 2 years, for example. So that would be a first mortgage with subordinate financing. There may be some grant programs that people are applying for now that are loan assistance programs, so that's why that checkbox exists there for either does or does not. You're going to want to protect your buyers by filling in these 2 blanks on line 66, and these are really important. These are major protection for them. You're going to want to say that their loan is going to be amortized monthly over a period of not more than a certain amount of years. There's some people who take a 15-year mortgage. There's even some 20-year mortgages, but what's most common is a 30-year mortgage. However, look at this. Back when I was writing in November, it was unheard of to have an interest rate more than 4%. So I put in with an interest rate of no more than 4%. But right now, interest rates are at 4.5%. So you may want to say with an interest rate of no more than 4.75%. The reason this is important is this is an out. If they made this offer in January and they said my interest rate shall not exceed 4%, and now it's at 4.5%, they would not contractually be obligated to buy the house. And the reason why is because you protected yourself with this contingency saying my monthly payment will be affordable to me if the interest rates are higher. So this is very, very important and a reason to call the loan officer and talk through. How much exactly are they putting down? How much do they have in reserves? What is the interest rate? What's their debt to income ratio? They may take a recommendation from you as to what their interest rate is, who their mortgage company is, or they most likely will come to you having a pre-approval from some who knows what kind of mortgage company. Work really closely hand in hand, no matter if it's your referral or especially if it's someone else that you've heard that before. All right, an additional item on the mortgage financing contingency is to truly protect your buyer. You're going to want to check line number 72 that says, if for any reason the buyer cannot secure the financing specified in this purchase agreement, that the buyer shall be able to get their earnest money refunded. That would be if they lost their job. That would be if, who knows, some unforeseen circumstance that, they get in a car accident, that they cannot afford to buy the house. Now, in a seller's market, the seller's not going to let this fly. So keep this in the back of your mind for the future, but it's not something that many sellers are going to agree to now. They may say, yeah, sure, I understand, if they lose their job, we would cancel, but then the earnest money gets forfeited, that $2,000 gets literally cut out of the trust fund of the real estate company and gets written to the seller as damages, so to speak. But what most sellers are going to be asking for right now is that the buyer will provide a written statement a certain amount of time before closing, usually it's like a week before closing or so, that says, yep, we still have our jobs, we've done the appraisal, we've done all the underwriting, and I commit to buying this house under any circumstance. No matter what goes wrong, I've given you this final acceptance date. So in this case, we said that this is gonna close on December 18th. An appropriate date to write in here would be maybe December 10th or December 1st. Maybe you make an offer on March 15th for a house that isn't going to close until July 15th. I don't recommend that. I recommend that closings be a lot sooner because there's just too many unforeseen things that can happen. But maybe it really needs to be that way because the seller says, hey, I'm building a house and you can't move in until this certain date. They may ask for the written statement then to be on May 31st, even though the closing isn't until July 31st. So these are instances and these are things that you're gonna wanna be talking through with Jessica to make sure that all things properly filled out in your purchase agreement before you submit it. Goes on to describe what the written statement is. Then it gives the buyer the option of either locking in at any time prior to closing, or what's becoming really popular right now is that they need to lock on their loan within 5 business days of this final purchase agreement. So interest rates are going up, and to protect both the buyer and the seller to make sure that the monthly payment is still affordable to them, the seller may say, hey, I want you to lock in this interest rate right now. There's also a possibility that when the appraisal takes place, not the inspection, that when the appraisal takes place by the company that the mortgage company has assigned, that appraiser may say, hey, there's some things that are unsafe in this house. These need to be repaired right now. Common things for that are like loose handrails. Sometimes there's ductwork that has come loose in the attic and it's blowing up hot air into this freezing cold Minnesota attic, and that creates condensation. And what does condensation create? Mold. So there may be some things that when the appraiser comes in, even if you bought the house, and said, I'm not doing an inspection, the appraiser may say, hey, these have to be done. Once they're done, then the appraiser goes back out, and this says here that either the seller or the buyer agree to pay that re-inspection fee. It's like, I think maybe $100 or $200. So to truly protect your buyer, you would say that the seller agrees to pay up to a certain amount of money to make repairs. I usually put in $1,000, maybe it's $2,000, maybe it's $500, depends kind of on the age and the condition of the house. And then I say that the seller agrees to pay these re-inspection fees. But right now, in a seller's market, that is likely not gonna fly. So you're probably going to have to acknowledge that you as the buyer are agreeing to increase your closing costs by whatever this re-inspection fee is, so that the work is done for by the seller, and then you pay your appraiser to come back out and look at it to make sure it's okay. If the buyer is using an FHA loan, there's something called an FHA escape clause, which is really good for FHA buyers right now, but not necessarily something that a seller is willing to tolerate in a seller's market. And that says if the home does not appraise for exactly what the contract sales price is, that the buyers would be able to cancel and they would not have to buy the house. So as you know, homes are appreciating very quickly. And so that means what all the comparable values in this townhouse complex, maybe 190, we're agreeing to buy it for 200. This says that if the appraisal comes in at 190, that they can cancel the purchase agreement and get out of it. And most sellers are not going to agree. There are also additional processing fees that have to be paid, especially for VA and sometimes for FHA. So on lines 140 through 147, you would need to talk with the loan officer and be very specific and very clear about how those fees are going to be paid. There's also an escape clause for VA, just like there is with FHA. And it goes on to talk about closing costs. So as you know, when a person buys a house, they put their down payment down, but then to To close on this mortgage, they're also going to have closing costs that are usually roughly 3% of the sales price of the home. So those closing costs go to pay for the time and all the work at the mortgage company. They pay for the title company, they oftentimes pay for the appraiser. They set up escrow accounts and have some prepaid things. So like I said, it's usually roughly 3% of the sales price of the home. And in a seller's market, a lot of sellers are not agreeing to pay these buyers' closing costs unless we change this to $206,000 and said that we ask them to pay 3% of the sales price of the home. Then it's a net the same to the seller. Does that math make sense?
That's how we did when we just bought our house.
So you can still get the seller to agree to pay for your closing costs if your sales price is high enough that it subconsciously makes it kind of a wash for them. But in most cases, you're going to say that the seller is not paying closing costs on behalf of the buyer right now. Then we go on to talk about the inspection contingency. All of that above was for financing. In the inspection contingency, you say either that you elect or decline to have a property inspection, and that it either is or is not contingent upon this inspection. So, follow me here. You can elect to have a home inspection, but not make your closing contingent upon it. That would be kind of a safer way to go. Or the safest would be to say we elect to have an inspection and we are contingent upon findings of the inspection, which means you can just back out, get your earnest money back completely if they find that the house is too much more work, too much money than they want to have to put into it. Most often, you're going to say that the seller does not allow the buyer to perform intrusive testing, and intrusive testing would be like cutting out a piece of sheetrock to see what the foundation looks like behind it, or cutting out a piece of the ceiling to see what, maybe the vapor barrier looks like in the attic. You have to really, really, really be smart and really be careful about these number of days that you say then that you're going to conduct the home inspection within, because this is the entire time frame that all negotiating and all final results are going to be given by. So let's just say you sell a house today on the 15th. You call your home inspector and you say, hey, I have a buyer. They've never done a home inspection before. I'm going to highly recommend you. They're also going to do some research online and see if they can find their own inspector. What's your first availability? They're probably going to say, oh, I have one opening on Friday, but if they don't book this with me by the afternoon, I'm sure that'll be gone. So let's just, for safety's sake, say it's not going to be until Monday. Okay, so the inspection takes place on Monday. Then the inspector writes his report, compiles a bunch of information in his computer program, and sends out a PDF to the buyer and you. And then that's usually the next morning. Then you and the buyer need to review that, and a lot of people like to sleep on that, so it may be not until a full week, next Wednesday, that you're actually saying to the seller, hey, these are the things that we're going to ask you to repair. And then they have to potentially go out and get bids and estimates and figure out, like, can I afford this? Does this make sense for me? So they need enough time to be able to then respond back to you, and you need enough time to be able to respond and say, yep, we can move with this or we can't. So I recommend saying that your home inspection will be done within 10 days is very wise. Sellers, if they're agreeing to allow you to do a home inspection, need it to be even shorter. It's not realistic though. Sometimes a person will come to you, let's say it's this couple that lives in a golf resort in North Carolina. They'll come to you and they'll say, hey, I just sold my house in North Carolina. It's not closing until May 15th, but I want to get started on my home search right now. I would love to try to make just one move. So if you're making an offer on behalf of that couple, you would say, yep, this purchase agreement is contingent upon the successful closing of this buyer's property, which is here in North Carolina. It has a full purchase agreement saying it's closing on May 15th. Or you would say this person does not need to sell a house to be able to buy their new house. Or you would say this purchase agreement is subject to an addendum to the purchase agreement, sale of buyer's property, and it gives a lot more information on that form, and we'll go over that in a couple of minutes. In a seller's market, number one is very likely not going to fly. Number two might be okay, and number three is going to be the best. The next section has to do with real estate taxes and special assessments. So the real estate taxes are paid, what's called in arrears. So everything that you pay in 2022 is actually based on the value of the house in 2021. And then those taxes are typically what's called prorated. So from January 1st until the date of closing is going to be paid for by the seller. And from the day of closing until the end of the year is most likely going to be paid for by you, by your buyer. But it's negotiable. So you could maybe to sweeten the deal, say, hey, I'll pay all your 22 real estate taxes, or maybe it's a property that's been on the market for a really long time, and you say, I don't want to pay any real estate taxes. I know you've already paid your first half, why don't you just pay your second half too? We'll consider that part of the negotiations. Or you can talk about it in terms of 12ths. But prorated is most common. You'll want to look at the property listing to see if the property is homesteaded or not. In this case, this one here in Excelsior is a homesteaded property. You see it over here on the right-hand side. The reason that's important is the state of Minnesota allows property owners to claim one property as their homestead. Any other property that they own would be taxed at a slightly higher rate. So if they have a cabin, if they have a rental property, if they have, a second home for their kids at college at the U of M campus or something like that. So when you're making an offer on someone else's house, if it said it was not homesteaded property, you would say like, oh, good news, then once I move in and homestead it, my property taxes will be a little bit lower than what they've advertised here. Now, I do believe the state of Minnesota is phasing that out. I haven't stayed on top of it, but for the purpose of line 222, you'll either, if the property is a non-homesteaded class, say that the seller is or is not going to pay the difference between the homestead and the non-homestead. Most people just check is not. It's like such a shell game, such a numbers game. Like it doesn't matter in a huge amount. It could to an owl, it doesn't to me, the owl, bull, tiger. Then it comes down to deferred taxes and special assessments. Most everyone, I'm talking 98% say the seller shall pay any real estate taxes they haven't already paid. Seller shall pay any special assessments that are certified right now. Seller shall pay any special assessments that are levied, and seller shall provide payment for any special assessments that are pending. Now, it does come up where there are special assessments that are levied or pending during the time that you're under contract, and then this means on the date of closing. So in the best interest of your buyer, you're protecting your buyer by saying that the seller shall pay for any assessments that come up, and that would be things like new curbs, new sidewalks, new street lights, new sewer system. There's a lot of that going on in Burnsville over the past few years, so it's really common in this area. Then, aside from all of that, the seller also needs to reaffirm that they have not received notice regarding any new improvement projects. And this really is pretty important. Like when you make your offer, you really shouldn't check either or, but when it comes back from the seller, you should make sure that they have checked that and it should be in their ballpark. Like they're the ones, you're not just making the assumption that they have not been assessed. You really do want them to say that whether they have or not. Okay, so let's just say you looked at 6 houses in one day with your buyer. Your buyer decided, I want house B. They make an offer on house B, and they get to the point of even conducting the home inspection, and then they decide, oh my gosh, this is way more work than I ever imagined. I no longer want house B. You sign a cancellation and you send it over to the seller. Well, the seller is probably not going to sign it the same moment, maybe the same day, but you better believe your buyer's already going to be back on Zillow, right? They're going to be saying to you, yep, we canceled on this one, and now already 1 hour later, we want to go look at this one. And sure enough, maybe they want to make an offer. So you do need to disclose to the sellers of the second house that you're making an offer on. Yep, we can make an offer on this, but we need you to know that it is subject to the cancellation of a previously written purchase agreement that we made last Friday, and we're expecting that cancellation back no later than tomorrow. This section also applies if your seller had accepted a previous offer and they're waiting for a cancellation, because they can put it back on the market to be shown to buyers like you, even if they don't have a cancellation back. And you may say, yep, no problem, I'm willing to take it on with all of its, flaws and all of its warts. I'm making an offer, but I have to acknowledge that this isn't truly going to be an accepted offer until that seller has received a fully executed cancellation. I'm seeing more of this, and I'm kind of surprised, but there are a lot of instances now where people are selling their houses with a trustee's deed, which basically means grandpa's in the nursing home, he's not very coherent, and the family members that he's assigned as his trustees are the ones who are going to be signing the purchase agreement and also signing the deed. So don't look like a rookie, just pretend you're not a rookie. And look down here and you'll be able to see how they plan to be selling the property. There. Do you know what it says on here in the new and improved look, whether it's being sold by a trust?
I do not.
Okay, well, just keep that in the back of your mind. But know that it is on here somewhere, and I maybe had it in even as a customized template from all the foreclosures and short sales that were taking place at a phase in my career. But there is a way to see on the listing if it is sold by a trust. But most often, you're gonna say that it is, they're going to be getting you a warranty deed. This is a good little negotiation tactic, and this says that you as the buyer shall receive possession of the property either immediately after closing or a certain amount of hours after closing. Now you can go even further and you can lease this house back to the owners for an extended period of time. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month, maybe it's 3 months, and I'll go over that for them in a couple of minutes. But the reason I say this is a good little negotiation tactic is, remember when I said that closing day is incredibly stressful? These sellers are like, holy moly, I need to move all of my life's treasures out, I need to get this house cleaned, I need to move my dog, I need to do all these things, and I'm just panicked about it, and then I'm handing over the keys, and you're gonna move in on my heels, like that doesn't feel right. But if you say to them, hey, just relax, you spend this last day, you'll know that the money is in your bank account, it is signed, sealed, and delivered, you just relax, come back to the house later that evening, get it cleaned up, you can hand me over the keys tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. or you can hand me over the keys tomorrow at 5 p.m. That may just be enough to tip the seller to be like, oh, thank you, they have so much grace and understanding. So use that as a little negotiating. Some buyers, especially the owls and lambs, are going to think you're crazy for suggesting it because, like, why would I trust someone else to be in my house? What if they damage it? What if there's a fire? What if there's a tornado? Yes, all of those certainly exist as concerns. The possibility is just so slim. So use that as a possible negotiation. This says that the seller acknowledges that they will permanently disconnect any linked devices that they have. So that's like their router, that's their Ring doorbell, and so forth. If there are things that are getting paid on a monthly basis, like primarily your city water bill and your association dues, that those are split, prorated evenly as of the day of closing. And then this goes on to talk about after final acceptance date, it is the seller's responsibility to prepare title to make sure that they're handing over clear title on the date of closing. The next few pages, I'm gonna scan through pretty quickly because it's a lot of things that you can literally just read word for word. And again, those personality types that want to ask these questions of you, you'll have read and rehearsed them, maybe even listen to my Loom videos on the dashboard, but for today you don't need to hear me keep talking. But if you were buying a farm with 100 acres, this would talk about the possibility of subdividing the land. If someone did work on the property but didn't get paid for it prior to closing, if they did not follow the proper steps to do a pre-lien notice, but if they did do a pre-lien notice, they could potentially file a lien on the property to make sure that they get paid by the seller. The seller warns that they've not received any notice from governmental authority of any ordinance or regulation that they are infringing upon. The dimensions that we put on the listing, which are down here, like the living room is 11.3 by 11.5, this room is just 12 by 11. All those measurements are meant to be generalities and that it is, or approximate, and that it is the buyer's responsibility to verify that. So if when your buyer is moving their king bed into bedroom number 1 that says it's 11 by 14, and they based everything saying like, oh, I know my king bed will fit because it'll fit in the 14 feet, and then they get in there and realize it doesn't fit, you just need to remind them they need at their showings to go through and tape measure and make sure everything fits to what their needs are. A lot of times these measurements are based off blueprints, and blueprints are done from the middle of the stud wall to the middle of the stud wall, so they're a little bigger than they actually are. The seller has to agree to allow the buyer that they can come into the property for municipal access to do things like the home inspection, the home appraisal, any measurements and what that they might want to do. There is a risk of loss clause in here. What that means is now we're coming into spring. If your buyer makes an offer on a house and before closing, they're under contract to buy a house, before closing, a tornado goes through and the house is completely demolished, they get to elect to either wait until that house is rebuilt or cancel the purchase agreement and give their money back. It talks about how we calculate days, what the definition of a calendar day versus a business day, and it reminds us that time is of the essence. So a lot of times in negotiations, buyers and sellers will say, well, what do you think? Should I respond like right now? Or should I make them kind of worry about it and like not respond until tomorrow? And they can do whichever they want because you're obedient and you'll do what they want. But the problem of that is negotiating is like a game of tennis. So if you're the buyer and you have the racket and the ball and you make an offer to the seller and the ball bounces over to the seller's in complete control. They can sign that offer and you are under contract to buy that house. But if the seller hits the tennis ball back to you and says, you know, 200 isn't quite enough for us, we think we'd like 205,000, and they hit that to you and you say, oh, I'm thinking, you know, maybe I'll just wait and respond to them tomorrow. The problem is the seller can say, nope, I rescind that counter offer that I sent to you because I just got an offer from someone else at 210,000. So when you have the ball, it is in your court. And when you hit the ball outside of your court, you run the risk of unforeseen things happening. So that's why it is called time is of the essence. And really it is best to negotiate as swiftly and efficiently as possible. Now there's different philosophies on all that, so you don't have to go my way, but know that things can seem very under control and then they can get very out of control. If we cancel this purchase agreement, this is how we would release the earnest money. We'd have to sign a cancellation and agree to it if either party defaulted. And then guess what? We talk about sexual predators again. Isn't that interesting? We can't discriminate against them. We then need to go on to say either they have received a property seller's disclosure or a seller's disclosure alternative. If the seller hasn't provided either of those to you, you need to go down here to the other section and say, this purchase agreement is contingent upon the seller providing a seller's disclosure by X date and time. Seller has to give you some amount of disclosure and you can insist it and then you want to document that in the purchase agreement. If they happen to have a well or a septic system, that's a whole separate amount of disclosure. And so you need to say in the purchase agreement here that yes, we are contingent upon these contingencies and that the seller does or does not know, therefore you either are or not connected to city water and sewer. We go on to talk about would they like a home warranty. The reason this is embedded in the purchase agreement is, I just learned this actually, you have errors and emissions insurance, but in order for your errors and emissions insurance to be in effect, you have to have done certain things with your buyer. And one is you have to have offered them the option of having a home inspection. Did you find it? Did you go looking for it? Okay, no problem. We can talk about it later. Let's go back to the dual agency situation. So a lot of times people their brain goes to, if I am the realtor representing the seller and I am the realtor representing the buyer, then I am a dual agent. But if Sarah Anderson at my real estate company represents the seller and I represent the buyer, well, she's the seller's agent and I'm the buyer's agent. That's not the case. As long as it's the same real estate company, it is always considered dual agency. And if it's a different real estate company, then you can do what feels natural, which is where you say that you're the buyer's agent and they're the seller's agent. You would then reiterate here, either dual agency does or does not apply. In this case, we're going to say that it does apply. If it doesn't, they don't need to sign there, but if it does, they must sign these buyer blanks over here on the right. Again, more of these things that you're gonna wanna read through and have them kind of in your back pocket for when those analytical buyers ask you what exactly it means. But we reiterate again that you as the buyer may be required to pay some closing costs will effectively increase the cash outlay at closing. That you are entitled to receive a settlement statement, which is a spreadsheet that shows you exactly what the costs are to close on that house. And that you'll receive that a couple days before closing. And look at that, another spot where it talks about, are they a foreign investor? Isn't that interesting? This does not become a fully executed purchase agreement until it's been signed by both parties and you write in a final date of acceptance. So I will admit, this is a pet peeve of mine. A lot of realtors, especially those who've been doing it for a very long time, will say, well, if the buyer made the offer on March 15th and the seller signed the offer on March 16th, that makes the final date of acceptance March 16th. Well, yeah, probably, but then why would they put a blanket here that says this is precisely the date of final acceptance? So just don't be sloppy. Just make sure that if your seller hasn't written in the final date of acceptance, that you then go back on your contract before you deliver it to all parties and write what the final date of acceptance is. The final date of acceptance goes down there. Some of the signatures on your documents may be hand signed. Some of them may be electronic. It doesn't matter. Both of them constitute valid binding signatures. And then again, like we said, this entire agreement is the purchase agreement and any other addenda that we checked on here. Whew, okay, if there's any other things that you want to add to the purchase agreement, like right now people are doing a lot of things related to appraisal gap guarantee, or we agree to pay $2,000 over any higher offer that you would show us proof of. We write those types of items in here, and Jessica will have whole classes on how to do that. And then if you are adding any addenda to this purchase agreement, it is really important that you put the check marks in here. So like I said, if they have a well or a septic system, you'd be checking for that because that's a separate contingency. If you're going to be renting it back to them, there's a line for that there. If we're doing the move-in agreement, if they're purchasing it as is, or if they're buying as a part of an association. So don't be sloppy and skip these. Make sure and check those boxes if you are including them with your offer. You're gonna leave all of this here on the left blank because this is where you want the seller to say whether they are or not a foreign person. And then if the seller does a counter offer when they send this back to you, they would check there that it's subject to a counter offer. This just has their printed names and then, like I said, the final date of acceptance. So before I have them sign anything on this last page, I'll always say like, oh, that was a lot of information. So take a deep breath. I'm gonna set this to the side. I need to go over something with you called arbitration. So I literally flip forward to the next form. And I say, in the state of Minnesota, when a buyer and seller enter into an offer of the possibility of purchasing a house from one another, the state of Minnesota wants us to have decided ahead of time, this is how we're gonna handle a problem should a problem arise. We don't wanna figure out how we're gonna handle the problem once the problem arrives because it's already gotten tense. So going into it, you have two choices. You can either agree to arbitrate a real estate dispute from after closing, or you can waive your right for arbitration and you can commit to going to court. You have to make the decision today. So every now and then someone will like make a phone call or they'll say, you know, like, can we have a minute? Can we talk that up with one another? And what I like to say is, you can still, if you sign arbitration, you can still go to small claims court, where any claim in small claims court would be $15,000 maximum. If you sign arbitration, you can still go to court. You just can't go to small claims court, so you'll probably pay $15,000 in your real estate fees. But the reason arbitration was designed was to be a more hands-on, in-person way of handling a dispute. So let's say you move into your house and you discover there's water in the basement. You would file a claim for arbitration, and the website that you go to is down here. And you would say, hey, these are the problems. This is a copy of the purchase agreement. This is a copy of my home inspection. This is a copy of the disclosure. And this is what the current situation is. the arbitration board would assign a non-biased arbitrator. That arbitrator then would call a bunch of people to the house and the meetings at the house rather than in the courtroom. And they would say, like, we probably need a foundation person. We probably need a landscaping person. We probably need the realtors, but not for sure the realtors. And then on site right there, a resolution is made as to whose fault it is and to how much it's going to cost to do that. You'll probably even still hire an attorney to come with you and kind of be by your side through this, but it is a way of not having to go to court and sit in front of a judge who maybe knows something about houses, maybe doesn't. So read through that arbitration form for the real analytical people. Most will say, well, I don't know, I mean, you're saying it's a program that's designed to kind of help people be more efficient. Do most people agree to it? You'll always want to say, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give legal advice. But I can tell you in my market center, at least 90% of the people agree to arbitration. So then I go back to the purchase agreement because now again, I've kind of like changed their train of thought a little bit and I'll say we've covered a lot, but now I'm gonna go over a couple more addendums. And then once we've gone over the addendums, then I'm gonna have you sign the purchase agreement. Okay, sounds good. So a couple addendums that are really common would be this addendum to purchase agreement, condo, townhome, co-op, CIC community. Now you don't have to live in a condo or a townhome community to have an association be a part of your property. But I live in a single family home, it's on a lake, and we own this skinny little strip of land as a group of 11 owners on the street, and we even have an association. So by state statute, we must give the potential buyers in our community a copy of our budget, a copy of all of our rules and regulations, all the founding documents. Then that buyer has the right to have 10 days to review those and make sure that they can live within those restrictions. So a lot of times what people cancel based on the CIC for is, I can't park my pickup truck that doesn't fit in the garage on the driveway. I can't have my pit bull. I can't have my 6 cats. I can't have my pet, snake or whatever. So this is really a whole bunch of information that, quite honestly, I haven't read in probably 20 years. But it just goes on to show the buyer why they are protected in the CIC 10-day right of rescission. Now, it's a possibility that, hey, maybe you're helping someone buy a townhouse in a townhouse community they already own investment properties in. Or maybe proactively, the seller of this townhome put the association documents out there as a supplement to the listing. You can say, okay, cool, these documents are right here, or I already know these documents really well because my mom and dad live there, or my bestie lives there. I can't waive my right to this entirely. I can shorten it to 3 days or any shorter amount of time. And this is the form that you would use to do that. That basically just takes what can be kind of stressful for the seller, like I have to wait around for 10 days to see if they actually want to buy this house, and you can sweeten the deal for them by shortening your right of rescission. But remember, it can only go down as low as 3 days. Okay, if the person who you're making an offer for does indeed need to sell their house, you use this one-page form that just outlines and says, hey, we're making an offer, my house is not yet listed, but I'm going to be listing it with Keller Williams within 7 days. Or maybe it's already listed with Keller Williams as a coming soon and it's going to be starting showings this week, so on and so forth. And then it also gives the seller a right to demand the removal of contingency. And if they do, it talks about how you go about doing that. And if there's a failure to remove contingency and whatnot, it's just a simple one-page document. Then I'm going to go on to just the very simple addendums and amendments. So when you're making an offer, you would do an addendum to your offer and just adding to the information. So this might be something like, I am committing to buy this house and I agree to pay $2,000 more than the highest offer, and I have put in a separate savings account, $20,000 to cover my appraisal gap guarantee. It might just be more information than fits in the other section per se, or maybe you don't want to mess up the purchase agreement and you just want it to be separate here on the addendum. I also, my brain goes to like, this house will be professionally cleaned because my child deathly allergic to cats or something like that. Any additional addendum that you wanna say. But if you are now in an executed purchase agreement, so you've agreed to all the terms of the contract, now you've done your home inspection and you say, seller agrees to replace the water heater, which is intermittently working. That would be an amendment or a change that you make to the purchase agreement. It's not an add, it's an amend. So that's why there's an addendum versus an amendment. Also really important, and this is more important for the sellers because it most often comes from them, but this is an addendum to the purchase agreement. This is a counteroffer. So if on that PA they checked and said that, yep, we've signed this PA, but only knowing that it is subject to our counteroffer, we want the price to be $210, we want more earnest money, and we want to change the closing date. Maybe they also say, buyer acknowledges that the chest freezer in the mechanical room shall not be included in the property. Then that would come to you and your buyers with the seller having signed on the left, and then you would execute on the right, and you would put in the final date of acceptance that you sign it there. It's a counteroffer. This is something called a move-in agreement. So there may be a situation, either addendum included with the offer, or maybe it's something you agree to after the fact, that this gives the buyer the right to enter and occupy the property before closing. Now that's a little bit more rare. The seller's lease agreement is more common, but this would allow the buyer to move in early. So let's just say the seller says like, oh, I'm actually already out of this property. We've already moved to Texas. And so I'm showing it vacant because I just felt it would show better vacant. So, if you guys are willing to pay me $2,000 more, I would let you move in 2 weeks early, which would allow you to not be as stressed out on closing day. And heck, that might be really appealing. Or maybe you say to this person, I showed your house, I can tell that it's vacant. Your realtor didn't tell me, but I'm guessing you moved somewhere. Maybe it's a retirement home, or maybe it's out of state or whatever. If I paid you $5,000 in rent, would you allow me to move in right away? And most people would say not until your appraisal is done and your final mortgage commitment has gotten closer. But these types of arrangements can be made, and they're essentially just short-term leases. So they do have like a damage deposit. They do encourage you to pay a monthly rent type of amount.
And that's prior to closing?
And then likewise, I know.
Makes me nervous.
It makes everyone nervous, but it's actually a really good thing in a lot of instances, because this is the converse. So let's say that you're building a new house, and your house isn't gonna close until December 20th. And you say like, oh God, the market just for sellers is just not as good between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I'm gonna list my house on October 1st. I'm gonna hope that someone wants to close on it November 15th. And then I'm gonna beg them to allow me to stay there, and I'm gonna rent it back from them.
Yeah.
So it works both ways. And the document is essentially the exact same for both of them, and it's just a very short lease. It talks about who pays the utilities, it talks about who pays the insurance. You basically just become a landlord. Which, being a landlord is also risky, but a lot of people do it. All right, so that is the buyer rent back, the seller rent back. Now, if there is a well or a septic system, you would, in representing your buyer, you would say, hey, I need to make sure that both of these systems are thoroughly checked out before we agree to buy it. So you'll include this form that says subsurface and sewage treatment system and well inspection contingency. So it says that the septic system is going to be tested and inspected most of the time by the seller at the seller's expense, and then the seller has to provide that all to you. And then also that you want to have a water test conducted on the well, and most of the time, again, that's done by the seller. I don't know many buyers who've paid for this to be done on their own. Once the information is accessible to the seller, it really is the seller's property, and then they can use it with future buyers if you decide to back out based on that. So most realtors prep their sellers that they are going to have to do those and pay for those.
The seller does.
The seller. Yeah, the seller. Okay, we are in the final stretch here, guys. I'm showing you the property disclosure. We are not going to go over it line by line. but I'm showing you the property disclosure so that you can see it is multiple documents, like, I think it's 11 pages or something like that.
Oh my God.
This is not something that you want a buyer to say like, yeah, I really decided I'd like to make an offer on this house, and you say, oh, I forgot to send you the seller's disclosure. Let me send you that right now, and then we'll write up the offer at the same time. No. I mean, people do it, and you can do it, but that is really bad business practice. Like, and now the owl in me is coming out, and I'm saying, you need to read this full disclosure to know what you're making an offer on. Because if they just sign it and they don't read it, and it says like, oh yeah, every year we have to have our sewer jetted, and every year in the spring we get water in the mechanical room. Like, if they haven't read that, and more embarrassingly, if you haven't read it,
Oh, gosh.
so you need to
Shame.
read it. Yeah, you need to read it before a buyer makes an offer. All right, so that's like 11 pages. You may also come to the instance where a seller has provided what's called a seller's disclosure alternative. And what that means is, I don't think I can have that in here. What that means is, maybe they're selling it for granny, they've never lived there, they don't know anything about it. Or the other option is, maybe they conducted a pre-inspection, and they provided that inspection to you, so they say, outside of this, we know nothing about the property. Here's the seller's disclosure alternative. Like I said, you could potentially facilitate for a buyer rather than assist them with a full buyer's representation contract. But what I want you to see is that it looks identical. I mean, literally identical to the buyer representation agreement. It still talks about the compensation. It still talks about that $3.99 broker admin fee. It still says within 180 days, if they buy this house, they owe you commission. It talks about who's going to schedule the closing. It talks about FERPTA. It talks about predatory offenders. It's exactly the same, except for on the first page, it says, what obligations do I owe you? I've either sent you a list of properties, sent you some comps so that you can decide what this house might be worth, shown you a variety of other properties, shown you financing options. Maybe I just wrote the purchase agreement. Maybe I didn't have to do any other of that stuff for you. Maybe I didn't even send you, like, here's home inspectors you could consider. Maybe I'm not even gonna bring you to closing. So in a facilitation agreement, you elect how much you're going to help them. And usually a facilitator gets paid less, which means you should have to do less work. So don't just freely and easily agree to do that all for them. Make them choose, like, I want you to do this and that. And the perfect example of that would be, hey, my grandma just died. My grandma's deciding to move into the neighborhood condo building, and I'm gonna buy my grandma's house. And that would be, I don't need to show you a bunch of properties. I don't need to do a bunch of comps, because grandma and I sat on the front porch and picked the price. I'm just writing the purchase agreement. Okay, make sense? Yeah. All right, now, I'm gonna add something in here, and therefore I'm gonna show you how to add. So this isn't in your form. So I learned this the hard way this weekend. I'm gonna show you how to write a cancellation. I don't want you to have to do a cancellation, but I need you to know that if you have to do a cancellation, that you need to fill out this proper form, and this is what it looks like. I really hate having to do this, but someone over the weekend wrote a letter, their buyer wrote a letter to the listing realtor saying, we wish to cancel on this. And that other realtor was like, what the heck is this? Yeah, you want me to do your work? And the realtor was like, I didn't even know this form existed. So you write in the date, today's date, you write in the date that the purchase agreement was written, you write the property address, and then you say that earnest money, that $2,000 we're requesting comes back to us as the buyers, or we acknowledge like, yep, you guys get to keep it as the sellers, or maybe there's something like we split it, or we donate it, or you can decide whatever it is here. And then you put in your buyer's address here, your buyer would sign it and date it, and then you would send just this one document to the listing realtor of the house or the lot or whatever that you decide to cancel on. But before we close out in the 1 minute we have left, I'm also going to talk with you about contract for new financing and 2 hold harmless forms that we have. Do you guys know anyone who's ever done a contract for deed?
I did when I bought a house in, we had.
Where was it?
Bought a house, we bought a property from my husband's aunt in Alabama, and then we ended up doing a contract for deed, and we sold it, because just the way the property was, it's the best option, so.
So there are really unique situations. Like one time I had someone who was trying to sell their house. It was a slower market, so it wasn't happening quickly. And they came upon this one single woman with children from their church who said like, I haven't worked in years, I've been raising my kids, but now I'm single, so I don't have credit. But I have parents who are willing to help me out, and I've been saving money away, so I can afford to buy this house eventually, and I can afford to pay you almost rent, so to speak. But I don't wanna just rent it from you, I want this to be my house, and so I want you to be the bank. And I'm gonna pay you on a contract for deed financing. It's very unique, it is very rare, but here's where I want you to hear what's valuable about it. You're gonna come upon all types of eager buyers in your real estate career. I mean, people that are so green and so young and so naive, and you're gonna be like, oh, you don't have US residency, like, I can't help you buy a house because you can't get a mortgage, or, oh my gosh, like, you've never had a credit card in your life, like, you can't buy a house without credit. And they're gonna say, but I've saved $100,000, I wanna buy a house. And you're gonna say, well, let me do a search for you and see if I can find any people who are willing to sell their house contract for deed. So if you go down here under the section that says compensation and financial, and then it says seller's terms, it would say cash conventional VA USDA contract for deed. So you can do an MLS search and see if there's any properties out there. And then keep that in mind too, it's a seller's market, so it's not so valuable right now, but keep that in mind for sellers who, like, maybe their house is just like a disaster zone, or maybe it's a 50 acres with a bunch of falling down barns, you know, there may be things where like they're not gonna sell overnight, but they'll still sell, and they might sell to the right person if you offer some of these creative financing types. So if someone does contract for deed, on the purchase agreement, you need to say that the financing is other, and then you need to use the separate addendum that says contract for deed financing. This basically just writes out the terms of the contract for deed. So I'm not gonna go over it with you now because it's very, very lengthy, but I want you to see that it exists. And then there's also a document in here that is educational, that says important information about contract for deeds. Hey, no problem. I would have closed the doors if I wanted to. And this is just a one-page educational document, but it does ask your buyers to sign it. And then there's two other forms that Keller Williams has put together that are helpful to you, and one is a buyer's hold harmless and one is a seller's hold harmless. So we'll go for the sellers on Saturday, but the buyer's hold harmless says, this didn't fall out of the system, just like a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago, there's a big conversion. Oh, here we go. This holds you harmless. It doesn't hold the buyer or the seller, it holds you harmless. So it basically says like, hey, you as the buyers sign and need to understand, I've made no guarantees or promises. You may need to seek legal advice, you may need to seek tax advice, but we waive, by reading this, we read the foregoing waiver of liability and hold harmless and understand it is voluntary in our free act. It just says that I release for full, adequate, and complete consideration, intending you to be promising. So if it's, you have to be obedient. And so if it's a house that you say like, oh my gosh, you have no idea what you're getting into, this is the money pit, I don't want you to buy this. And they say like, yes, I watch HGTV all day long, and I know that I can make this into a gorgeous house, and I know it's gonna be fine. You say, okay, but my brokerage also wants you to sign that.
Yeah.
How about it?
Good, really good.
All the information.
It's a lot. They're
Yeah.
all legal documents, you guys, they're all things that are really, really important. So they're not to be taken lightly. Read them, educate yourselves, highlight them, rehearse them for the fun of it. When you're riding in the car with your kids, say, hey, can I do a buyer rep agreement?
That's what I'm headed to go do right now, is a practice buyer rep agreement with my sister.
Good job. That is awesome. Really, really awesome. Well, I am here for you. You guys have my email, so you know how to contact me, but really I'm at your service. So please please use me as a resource. Jessica is more available than I am. But I am here to serve you, to make sure that you are compliant, to make sure that you are feeling strong and confident, and just wish you the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.